It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to talk to people who have a little bit of interest in California condors. For some of you, it might be a refresher course. I know in the case of one person, it will be a refresher course, and hopefully it'll be a little bit of education for all of you. So without further ado, this is our presentation here. This is the view from Copper Mountain National Wildlife Refuge, and we are looking out over actually we're kind of looking out over the mountains toward Los Angeles from there, and it's really a nice view up there. And the purpose of the Friends of California, Friends of California Condors is, we focus on a little bit of research, but our main thing is outreach. We want to try to educate people. We want to try to, let people know that there's a good bird out there. There's a reason for keeping this bird, because the condors, like the turkey vultures, the black vultures, they're all part of nature's cleanup committee. And what they do basically is they clean up the environment. They take all the dead carcasses and clean up the area so diseases are not being spread around and different things like that. So moving right along, a little bit about me. I've been a board member of the Friends of California Condors since 2013. I've participated in quite a number of different things over there. I've done outreach, and I used to work up at a radar site up at the north end of the San Fernando Valley, and that's where I first started seeing condors in the late 1990s. And they would come up there, and condors are very inquisitive. They would come up there and they would tear the insulation off our wires, and they would get under the vehicles and try to take the fuel tank, the fuel lines out, and they would take the weather stripping around the trucks for the windshields. They're very inquisitive. They're troublemakers. My specialty with the Friends group is telemetry. I tutored under a gentleman named Vince Gerwe, and he taught me all that I needed to know about telemetry, and some of my telemetry gear is over there. Telemetry comes basically in two kinds. It's either VHF frequencies that are, transmitters that are on the tails and wings, and then there's GPS, and so I kind of keep track of all of that, and I also create a spreadsheet for our group so that we know when we go out on tours that what we're looking at, and for those that have telemetry equipment, we know where to find them and how to catch them on the radios. I've been a birder all my life. I've raised everything from sparrows to mockingbirds. I've had crows, canaries. I currently have a cockatoo. So I've been a bird man seems like forever. And in captivity, it's interesting that crows can live a rather long time too. I've had one for 16 years and we had one for 21 years. So I'm not sure how long they live in the wild, but they sure lived a good life in our house. And this is condors at the radar site. So I got 3 birds sitting up there on the tower, just kind of looking around. And a little bit about our Friends group. We're volunteers that we work closely with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. We try to help them any way we can. We were incorporated as a formal organization in 2008. We became incorporated at that point, and we've been going ever since. We are based in Ventura at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Office in Ventura area. We're part of 22 organizations that support the California condor. You'll see the word CACO up there. That's California condor. So anytime you see that word CACO, that's what it means. So, we're one of 22 organizations that are involved in it. We also perform refuge maintenance. We conduct tours, which is one of my favorite things, is educating the people about what we're seeing. And we do provide limited financial services assistance to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and that can come in the form of buying equipment for them, like spotting scopes or net. We've provided for nest cameras and different things like that. We've even funded travel for some of the auxiliary people, like our lead outreach people. We've funded them to go traveling around. We've even funded our favorite person, Jan Hammer, who I'll touch base with a little bit later. And we are funded by donations and gifts. You know, that's how we gather our money so that we can spread it around to all the different people. And these are the partners that are involved with Fish and Wildlife, National Park Service, Forest Service, lots of different people involved in this, including, let's see, I don't know if you folks will be able to see this. That's not a good color. But the newest one is the Yurok tribe up here, right in this area. Yeah, they are our newest group to have condors. Phoenix Zoo, LA Zoo. Whoop, let's back up just a tad here. Little condor history. California condors may have occupied much of North America. They've been found as far east as Florida. There have been skeletons found in New York, in the upper areas of New York. They've been around a long time, over 10,000 years. The early causes of condor decline included loss of habitat. That's probably the major thing. But during the gold rush, people would shoot the birds and they would take the quills and they would fill them up with gold dust to kind of transport it around. So that was one of the reasons. Egg collecting was a big problem. Shooting, poisoning, DDT, and there's something else called 1080 that was a big cause of the declines. Cultural sacrifices. You know, the Indians, they hold condors to be very dear. And so to collect feathers, they would take birds. Modern causes of bird decline include lead toxicosis, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Power line impacts, predation by other animals, wildfires. We lost 10 birds in wildfires over there in the Central California group. The Dolan fire, if everybody remembers that, the flight pen over there got burnt and we lost 10 birds in that. So that was an unfortunate thing. Condor population, ultimately from all of this, the condor population was reduced to very, very small patches of land within the Los Padres National Forest in Ventura and Santa Barbara counties. It's kind of a sad situation. Historically, this is the areas that they covered. So it looks like everything west of the Rocky Mountains, all the way up to from British Columbia down into Mexico. There's one spot up in probably the Catskills of New York up there where skeletons have also been found. But historically, that's where they were found. And in the Lewis and Clark expedition, this was one of the first pictures that was ever drawn of a condor. When they first saw the condors, they were impressed by how large they were. So one of the gentlemen in the group actually drew a picture of it and talked a little bit about what it was he saw. We all know John Audubon. This is the picture that he drew way back then, and we have a stuffed condor, an old one. Interesting thing about the necks, everybody wonders why they have bald heads and long necks. Well, it's just to get inside the carcass. They get in there, they'll tear the carcass open and eat, and they'll open up the carcass so other birds can get in there, other scavengers will get in there. But their heads are clean so that they won't incur any diseases. Things won't stick to them, easy to clean. In the mid-20th century, this was their habitat. This is the areas that they covered. And this area right down in here is where Hopper Mountain and Bitter Creek is. What they did is they follow along the areas where their thermals are, because they're gliding birds. They don't flap. And this is historically where they used to cover. So in 1905, the first California laws were enacted to make killing and collecting of condor carcasses and eggs illegal. Very difficult to enforce, though. It's like writing a law that is unable to be enforced. In 1947, the Sespe Condor Preserve was established in the Los Padres National Forest, try to discourage the cultivation of minerals and petroleum mining. There's still a lot of petroleum being pulled out of there right now, but the companies that are up there have really taken steps to mitigate their footprint in there. Seneca Oil is one of the big people over there in Hopper Mountain area. 1975, Hopper Mountain National Wildlife Refuge was established just north of Fillmore to further protect the habitat of the condors. A flight pen was later constructed there, although today it isn't used as much as the one over at Bitter Creek. 1985, 1987, Bitter Creek National Wildlife Refuge was created at the southwest corner of the San Joaquin Valley. Those of you who know where Maricopa is, that is extremely southwest corner, and it's just up in the mountains above Maricopa. A flight pen was later constructed over there, and that's where we do most of the trapping and releasing of the birds. 1992, the Sespe Wilderness Area was created to further protect the condor from different issues. Condor biology. Condors belong to a group called Cooperative, which basically means they're New World vultures. They differ from the Old World vultures, which are in Europe and Asia and Africa. They are distinctly different, so they have been broken into two categories: New World vultures and Old World vultures. The three we mainly see around in the United States are the condor, the black vulture, and the turkey vulture. The other three, the king vulture, greater yellow-headed, and the lesser, they're more down in South America area. So. Nine and a half foot wingspan. They are the largest land bird in North America. And in the Americas, the only one exceeding the California condor is the Andean condor, which has a wingspan of 10 and a half, probably near 11 feet, but 9.5 feet on the California condor, which probably equates pretty close to some of the seabirds. I know that some of the seabirds, like the wandering albatross, have 12-foot wingspans. So that's pretty big. Average weight 19 to 25 pounds, probably 25 pounds after they get done eating. I would say probably 20, 22, 23 pounds is probably close to what is reality in terms of weight. Condor comparisons, wing size. You know, we all know about turkey vultures. Golden eagles, bald eagles have a similar wingspan to a golden eagle, but within 6 months of hatching, a juvenile condor will be at full size. At the time that they fledge, they're already full size. So there's a lot of growth that occurs in that 6 month. Okay, you can kind of see that the adult condor has a white patches underneath the wings. A juvenile has kind of grayish, almost white, but not quite there. But it gives you an idea of how big the wingspan is compared to like a turkey vulture, which we see out around all the time. I see them out in Sierra Valley. Here's kind of a size comparison too, when you look at it. And you could also see the different wing colors. You know, the turkey vulture has scalloped wings as opposed to the straight wings of the condor. You'll also see that the coloring, the condor has white patches in the front of the wings, where the turkey vulture has coloring at the rear side. And over on the left is the side-by-side pictures. So if you were to see them, that's how big they are. Probably about another third or so bigger. Lifespan, they're one of the longest lifespans in the avian kingdom. We say more than 60 years. We don't actually know. We do have a condor in captivity down at the LA Zoo who's 58 years old right now. And he's still siring. He's still a dad, even to this day.
He started late.
He started late, yes. He did. In fact, when they captured him in 1967, it was about 15 years. He was the only condor in captivity. And when they first tried to bring a bird in there to mate with him, they found out it was a guy. So they had to wait a little bit. They had to wait a little bit. Let's go back here just for a second. They do not have very well developed chest muscles, so they don't flap a lot. They can soar 150 miles a day and maybe flap less than 5 times.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. But they soar, and they can soar at elevations up to 15,000 feet. So seeing one up there almost looks like a small airplane. They're that big. Breeding pairs have 1 chick per nest attempt, and usually that nest attempt is every other year in the natural world. And so that's one of the things that kind of works against them, is that 1 chick every other year, because it takes 6 months for the chick to fledge from the time it hatches, and then another year it will spend with the parents learning how to be a condor, learning where all the food sources are, learning the pecking order of things. Just it takes them a while to figure it out. So since they stay with the parents so long, the parents usually have 1 chick every other year. However, they have been known to double clutch, even in the wild. Sometimes a nest will fail, and they, on a rare occasion, will have another egg in there. And this is one of the keys to the captive breeding program, is we've learned that thanks to one of my heroes, Jan Hamber. She kind of figured that out, that, on a rare occasion, they will double clutch. So that's one of the reasons that the condor recovery program is so successful.
Does that mean you take an egg away and then they lay another one?
That could be, yes. In captivity, that is true. In the wild, they don't do it so much, but it has been known to happen.
That's how we started, was taking them out of the wild
Yes.
and putting in a dummy egg.
And then when it was ready, because it's about 57 days or so, they would take a pipping egg from, let's say, the LA Zoo, where a chick is just starting to poke its head out, and they would go back into the nest and change the fake egg out with the real one, so that the chick would be hatched in a natural environment. And here's a picture of Topa Topa. He gets to wear number 1 because he's our oldest bird. He's the oldest bird. He's the oldest California condor, period. AC4, which stands for adult condor 4, is our oldest flying bird. And he's 44 years old right now. And he is still flying around Bitter Creek in the southern end of the San Joaquin Valley. He'll go up there into the Santa Barbara mountain areas, and he'll come all the way back around into Tehachapi and points north. So these are our 2 oldest, they're basically the 2 oldest birds that we have. I don't know if we have any others in captivity that are older, but I know that our wild bird, 44 years, that's pretty ripe age. And you'll notice too, he's got a full crop. And what that means is that he's eaten. He's probably good for 3 or 4 days, maybe as much as a week, depending on whether he's feeding a chick or just feeding himself. So that's always a good sign when we see that. Condors do not take other animals. They only live on dead stuff. Therefore, their feet are more like chicken feet or turkey feet. Now, the difference between, like eagles, they have talons where they can actually grab something and run off with them. Condors can't do that. They can roost, they can walk around, but that's probably the extent of what they can do. And they don't really need to do anything else. Because like I say, they do not kill anything. The different head colors. We have a juvenile on the left. which is totally gray, and he'll be gray for maybe 4 years, possibly 5, and then he'll start changing color, and then he'll look like the one on the right. And the interesting thing too about the condor colors is it shows their moods. You know, if they're kind of laid back, kicking back a little bit, they may be more on the pink side. If they start getting a little bit agitated, let's say they're mating or they're, another bird is coming into the territory, they can change colors and their head becomes more orange and yellow, and you can kind of see their moods with it. So that's always interesting. And the condor eye is one of the sharpest eyes in the world. Owls can see very well at night, but condors can see food from extreme distances. I mean, we're talking miles out there. But another thing that's interesting too, that I found out about condors is that they may not necessarily look for food on the ground, but they'll look for other birds that are scavenging. Let's say they'll find a bunch of turkey vultures sitting over a deer or something like that. And the condor will see that and it'll go down there, and being the biggest bird, everybody just kind of backs off and lets him have it. And he will open up the carcass and then everybody can eat. And when I say everybody, it can be eagles, it can be hawks, it can be ravens and crows, it can be anything that eats dead stuff. So, but they have a very, very sharp eye. There's only a little bit of feather around the eye, around the head, but basically the heads are kind of bald. And that's for sanitary reasons. It helps keep the diseases off of them. Condor population history. In the early 1900s, it was noticed that there was a rapid decline of the birds. The early ornithologists were looking, and they saw that there weren't many. They probably estimated anywhere from between 150 and 200 birds at the time. But in the 1930s, the population was dwindling. They really didn't know why, but they noticed that it was going down. It was going down at a very rapid rate. In the 1960s and 70s, might have been 60 birds, close to it anyway. And then by 1982, there were only 22 birds left in the world, including Topa Topa down at the LA Zoo. And they had a few others in captivity too. So probably the total number was 27, but 22 birds left in the wild. 1983, 1987, the remaining 22 birds were captured, with the last one captured, AC9, captured on Mother's Day of 1987. So for 5 years, the condors were extinct in the wild. They basically were all captive, and they were all, we were all trying to do the captive breeding program. And that's kind of a sad thing that's what it was. It took our intervention to make it happen. 1988 to 1991, we imported some Andean condors to tag and release, because the Fish and Wildlife and the people who were managing the recovery program didn't know how to release the birds. They didn't know what to expect. So they brought in a bunch of female birds and they released them just to see what it would take to release them, what would they do, where would they go. I have a friend that worked up at the dam site at Pyramid Reservoir in Upper Piru Canyon in Southern California, and he snapped a bunch of pictures of the Andean condors while they were there. So once we, Fish and Wildlife, all the people involved understood what they had to do, they recaptured the birds so that there would never be any commingling of, we would never get a mutt out of the group. So we tagged them, we put radio transmitters on them, and just took it. So this was taken up there at the dam site at Pyramid Reservoir. And this shows the decline of the population. The red is the declining historical population. The captive population, by 1987, there were no birds in the wild. And in the early 1980s, they started working with the condor recovery program and starting to bring life back to them. So our captive population as of 2019 is up there near 200. Actually today, and I have a slide a little bit later that'll show what we have. The wild population started increasing and the wild fledge started increasing. So we are up now, as of today, because I just took a look at the numbers, we have a world total of 570 condors, increased from 22. And that's a wonderful thing, wonderful thing. In the captive breeding program, at the end of 2023, we had 217 birds spread out over 5 different hatcheries, if you would call them that. There are a total of 353 wild birds spread out into 4 or 5 flocks. The Southern California flock currently has 94 birds in it. The Central California flock, 100 birds today. And Central California comprises Big Sur and Pinnacles National Park. So, and they have a release site at Ventana Wildlife Group. They have a release site up there, so that's where their birds are released. Pacific Northwest, Northern California, 12 birds. Now, this is the Yurok group. They started in 2008. They started the process of trying to get and release condors. They wanted to manage them. It's a heritage thing. They wanted to have condors up there. So just in 2022, they got shipped some condors from the World Center of Bird Prey. And now they have 12 birds in their flock. Arizona-Utah flock has 99 birds in it. Unfortunately, it could have been a little bit more, but last year we lost 22 of those to something called avian flu. They call it H-Pi. It's further in my slide. And the Baja flock at the end of 2023 has 48 birds in it. And it's in the northern portion of Baja California. There's actually some mountains up over there that get upwards of 10,000 feet. So they have all of the right stuff over there. So there's 48 birds in their flock over there at the end of 2023. I don't have the latest numbers on what is there right now. They do fly over the Grand Canyon. So I did not take this picture, but this picture was taken from Navajo Bridge at the very eastern end of the Grand Canyon, actually near Lake Powell area. So they're out and about. Captive breeding sites. San Diego Wild Animal Park is one of them. And the LA Zoo. Those were probably the first 2 breeding sites. They are still very active. LA Zoo is very, very active. Thank goodness. Oregon Zoo is part of the sites. World Center for Birds of Prey in Boise, Idaho. They breed birds. And I remember when I first was getting involved with the Friends of California Condors group, that birds were being transported from there to Southern California. And we would meet in Las Vegas and we would exchange birds. We would give them birds and they would give us birds. And I think the purpose of that more than anything was to try to keep the gene pool as diversified as possible, because when everything starts from 22 birds, the bloodlines are going to be just a tad weak. So I was not part of that exchange, but I know it happened because I know people who were doing that transport, and they would transport them in vans and they would transport them in the biggest portable dog kennels that you could get. And the vans were air conditioned so that they weren't experiencing all the heat that Las Vegas has. So it was quite a deal transporting birds back and forth back then. Now they probably do it by airplane now, but and the zoo in Mexico City, that's a breeding site too. So those are our 5. They're the ones. Most of the birds in the lower 48 all come from the top 4. And I noticed, today when I was looking at the Yurok birds, that they get them from the World Center for Birds of Prey. And they also get them from the LA Zoo and they get them from the Oregon Zoo. So their flock is kind of diversified, which is good. Trapping and release pens. Hopper Mountain and Bitter Creek at the refuges. We don't use Hopper Mountain that much. Even though it's been rebuilt, we don't use it that much. Most of the activity is occurring over there at Bitter Creek. These are the release sites. Hopper Mountain was the first one, which is why it's the black star. Bitter Creek, 1995, started releasing birds over there on a full-time basis. Vermilion Cliffs, which is kind of right at the northern edge of the Grand Canyon. That's their site for release. Big Sur, the Ventana group, they released the birds over there, even though the Pinnacles National Park is part of that. That's the release site for them. Sierras de San Pedro Martir National Park is where they released them down in Baja. And last but not least, well, Pinnacles. San Simeon. I've never seen birds released there. I don't know that much about that particular site, if that's even active. I still think that most of the activity for Central California is over there at Big Sur and Ventana. And then the Yurok tribe up in Northern California. So they have a flight pen up there, and they have possession of 12 birds up there that they're monitoring. This is the Bitter Creek flight pen. Although that's an older picture. They've rebuilt it a little bit, so it looks pretty nice over there. But you can see condors on the inside and condors on the outside. There's a little swimming pool over here where they'll go over there and they might bathe a little bit. There's water in there. They might drink from it. There's the outside of Bitter Creek National Wildlife Refuge, the flight pen visitors. That's 328 over there on the left side, 216 in the middle, and an unknown juvenile in the middle, or on the end. He's the male down there, female. Those are both the king and queen of Bitter Creek. They're the most prolific. They've been a pair for, I want to say, 8 to 10 years.
And this pen is right down in Bitter Creek Canyon?
It's kind of on a plateau. It's not on a canyon. It's on a plateau. Yeah, it's up above. It's not too far from Pit Trap. You know where that is.
The original one?
Yeah, the one where they caught the.
Gotcha.
This is the inside. This is interesting because once the birds get inside the flight pen, in order to do what they call workups, they catch the birds and then they do different things to them. They do blood testing and feather checks. But it's interesting to see that because once they're inside, the way you catch them is like catching butterflies, except it's like catching a 20-pound butterfly. Not very easy to catch them. So you got a couple of herders in there and one with a net to finally catch them. Okay, what we have here is a bunch of immature birds, and then we have one mentor bird. And the mentor bird will kind of teach them things about being a condor. The pecking orders will be established at this point. Bonding will be occurring at this point. They kind of become friends and in groups and stuff like that. Condors, when they bring them in, they're kept at the nesting areas for probably a year and a half, something like that. And then they're brought into the flight pens where they'll spend another 6 to 8 weeks getting acquainted with things. And among the things we have in there is telephone poles with a little tiny electric charges, so they'll learn not to land on them. Here's a bird that's it's a 2-door setup to get the bird in from the outside, trap, close the door, trap the bird, open the door in, and then the bird will come in. we put a calf in there. And we feed the birds. This is the only time we actually feed the condors is when we're in the trapping process or the birds are inside the pen. Otherwise, we do not supplement their diets. We do not do anything to help them along. But when we put a calf in there, it's the feeding frenzy. And so the question comes, where does the calf come from? Down at the south end of the San Joaquin Valley, there's a bunch of dairies down there. And what we do is we find out when they have stillborn calves. And we go and collect them, and we have this big refrigerator on the premises there that we keep all of that stuff in. And I can't tell you how bad it smells in there when you go inside. It's bad. But that's where we keep that stuff. And the reason we do that is because when we feed them, we want to feed them sterile food that has not been shot at or anything that they're going to find outside. If we get it right from the dairy, the food will be untainted with any diseases or anything that man could be involved with. Condor maintenance. We try to capture the birds twice a year for workups. What is a workup, you ask? Well, we do health checks, which is basically blood samples, feather examinations, overall appearance and behavior. It used to be that we would take blood samples and actually measure lead content, but we don't do that anymore. And I think maybe COVID had something to do with it, but I think the approach now is more of a hands-off approach. We don't want to imprint on them any more than we have to. So if the bird looks good, we release him right there on the spot. If he doesn't if he looks like he's got a problem, he'll be immediately packaged up and transported to the LA Zoo, because that's the closest place to do any remedial effort. We also check the identification, the wing tags, telemetry. They have little transmitters in their tail feathers, and we do tracking equipment checks just to make sure that we can follow them around, whether it's GPS or whether it's VHF. And these wing tags, I have an example of a wing tag over here on the table. They identify the bird. Now, why do we need to identify these birds? Well, first thing is we got to know their heritage. We got to know what birds are doing what with what birds, basically. So each bird has a wing tag. The wing tag is basically the stud book number. Somewhere there's a master stud book that every condor is assigned a number when the eggs hatch. And some condors, the numbers never repeat. So some condors don't make it, but the number is never repeated. So we check the wing tags. Not only do we check them for their presence, we check them for electrical operation, whether it's a GPS or whether it's a VHF. We also check the wing tag hole, because we put a little hole in the wing to attach this wing tag to the bird. It doesn't hurt them, but over a period of time, these holes will get elongated a little bit. And when we see that, we'll transfer the tag from, let's say, the right wing to the left wing. Give that little hole a chance to close up, kind of like an earring. So that's one of the things that we do. VHF transmitters are located in the wings and the tail. That particular wing tag I have over here is a VHF transmitter. We also have GPS transmitters on the wings, and we use the GPS through the cellular network so that we can actually track where the bird is at any time. And it's interesting to see some of the loops and some of the different places that they do go to, because in that 150 miles, here's an example of a bird being worked up. You know, it takes at least 2 people, maybe 3 people to hold the bird. And the one thing you have to be real careful of is their beak, because they can tear open stuff real quick, and you know, flesh does not put up much resistance. And it's always a badge of honor to be bitten by a condor, at least in some cases. Okay, we check the feathers. We're always looking at the feathers and making sure the feathers look okay. This is condor number 98, 098, so he's one of the early birds. So we're looking at things, just making sure that the bird is looking pretty good. We do a blood test. Like I said, we used to do on-site lead testing, but we don't do that now. But what we do is we keep this just to make sure that if the bird ever loses a wing tag, we know who he was and he was a part of. And we can trace through the DNA, we can figure out what his number is, and we can get a new wing tag on him. The top causes of condor mortality over the last, 30 years or so. Lead is the #1 cause of condors. And it took all of the people a long time to figure this out. They didn't realize that not only lead from, being shot, obviously, but lead from carcasses, gut piles, different things like that. The second thing was predation. Golden eagles will do kind of prey on condors a little bit from the sense of the juveniles, especially the fledglings. But there's even been bears that have tried to get into the nests. Ravens will get into the nests and either go for the eggs or they'll try to attack a young condor. Power lines, the third leading cause of deaths. Their wingspan is so big that they can actually stretch out between the power lines. That's more of the problem than them just landing on a single line, because they're not completing a circuit just by landing. When you see birds landing on the wires, they're not dying because they're not completing a circuit. They're just on one leg. But condors have such a big wingspan that they can actually touch both legs. And it'll kill them. Down south, we had a fire down there called the station fire that burned up about, 200 or 300 square miles. And it was started by a hawk, oddly enough, that hit a power line, caught on fire, landed at the base of the tower, and started that fire. It's a rare thing, but it does happen. So in the flight pens, we have little telephone poles that have little wires on them that actually put out just enough of a charge that it tickles them, and they don't like it. So that's how we kind of teach them not to get near power lines. Lead bullets. People don't realize that when they shoot something, a lead bullet will fragment into thousands of little pieces. And those little pieces get all over the animal. And when hunters, not just hunters, but when they leave a gut pile, they kill a deer, they leave the gut pile down there, all of the carrion eaters are all down there eating it, and they're ingesting this lead. And it's either going to kill them or it's going to kill the chicks. Here's an example of some lead inside one of the condors that had died. It doesn't take much, just one little speck of lead will cause that condor to die. It just doesn't take much. So it isn't old age that causes the condors to die. It's lead poisoning, lead toxicosis. But golden eagles also eat carrion, and they are subject to the same issues that condors are. And I saw a video sometime back of a bald eagle that had just ingested lead, and it was not a pretty thing to see. The bird is sitting there shaking and he's laying it. It's just, I don't even want to describe it. It's not good. But bald eagles, golden eagles, anything that eats carrion is subject to that. Turkey vultures are not quite as, they don't get the lead as bad, but it's serious for them too. So the alternative to lead is copper bullets. And you can see that on the right, they mushroom, they don't disintegrate like a lead bullet. So as of 2019, July of 2019, it is not legal to hunt with lead in California. Can't hunt anything. And on the subject of lead, I noticed in the back there, we have an osprey over there. I would say that any water bird might be subject to lead poisoning if he eats a sinker or, something on the end of a fishing line. So if anybody knows any hunters that are still using lead, that can be a problem, not only for the ospreys, but for all of the food chain. All of the food chain is affected by lead. The amount of lead that the human being can tolerate is zero. It is really bad for us. And I say that because, I handle lead shot when I'm reloading my shotgun shells. I'm a clay target shooter, so, I reload shotgun shells, but I have to be real careful with lead too, because I can suffer from toxicosis if I don't keep myself washed up and clean, get that lead off. Microtrash, not so much of a problem today, but there was a time that condors would pick up lots of different things. They would pick up bones because it would help them digest, but in there they would also pick up beer can tabs. They would pick up bottle caps and springs and just lots of different things. And here's a chick that died with a bunch of junk inside him. So one of the things they used to do when they went in to do nest entries, they would go in there and actually take a little sifter and sift all the dirt around there and try to get the microtrash out. We found that basically microtrash isn't near as much of a problem now because they've just avoided it. But here's a case where Taco 846 is a wild hatch bird. During a workup, we found a whole bunch of junk inside of her. And so we had to get in there and pull it out. 846 is still living, and she is now has a mate with Taco 462, and she is currently sitting on an egg right now in a wild nest. So that's a good thing. So she was a survivor of that. And the release, when we finally get done with our workups at Bitter Creek, that's the release. We just kind of turn them loose and they flap a little bit. This is kind of a downhill slope, so they can spread their wings out. Once the wings get spread out and they're soaring, they never flap again. The only time they do it flap is when they're landing. And we've been up there at the radar site, my wife and I, and we've listened to the birds land, and the wing tips, the primary feathers move so fast they actually break the speed of sound. So it sounds like a snap, 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 snap when they're landing. We've seen them landing on the equipment there. Oops, let's see. Okay. That's me doing some telemetry. I always stood in the background while everybody was out looking for condors with binoculars. I would be out there doing the telemetry. So I'm looking for them electronically. And I'm listening for beeps. And this over here on the right side is a GPS track of a bird, 978. This was a plot that he did over a period of time. So we can kind of see that here's the Hopper Mountain area, Ojai down here. He went over here to Carpinteria up in the mountains above Santa Barbara, all the way around through the Tehachapi area. So you can kind of see where he's been. This is a very valuable tool for them, for the Fish and Wildlife and all the people that are monitoring, that they can see where these birds go. Condor nest cavities. 328 sitting in a hole over there in the Bitter Creek area. We also notice a bird. We don't have any birds down in the Southern California flock that nest in trees, but they do have some birds up there in Central California that do have nests in the trees. Hutton's Bowl is down there in Southern California. This is a live stream. We actually, one of the things that Friends of Condors, we supply the Fish and Wildlife. We help them pay for nest cameras. And every once in a while, the Cornell Labs will set up a live stream of the condor so we can actually watch them from the time the chick hatches all the way to fledge. Tom's Canyon, which is also down in Southern California, is part of the Hopper Mountain Refuge Complex, or actually Hopper Mountain area. Hopper Mountain Complex is Hopper Mountain, Bitter Creek, and also Guadalupe Dunes. So we also kind of deal with shorebirds too. And we do go out there and help. Wind wolves. This particular nest, this is at the southern end of the San Joaquin Valley, just outside just east of Bitter Creek. And this is the first time they've had a nest over there in wind wolves. Wind wolves, to describe wind wolves is to look out at a prairie with tall grass, and when the wind blows, the grass kind of waves and moves around in a synchronous type of movement. And it's almost like watching wolves. So the area is called Wind Wolves Natural Preserve. Pole Canyon, this is also in the Hopper Mountain area. And we do have another picture of this because here at the top of this hill, you can see somebody standing up there. There's a rope that's actually coming down in here so that they can get into that nest hole. You know, these people that get into these nests, they have to be rock climbers, they have to be mountain goats to get in there. And they pack all of this equipment in. Long, you know, it may take days to get in there. Nest entries. We used to do it 5 times a year. We used to do it 5 times. And we did it for egg viability. We would check the egg to see if the egg was a good egg, as opposed to a dead one or an infertile egg. So we checked for egg viability. We used to do 30-day health checks after hatching just to see how the bird is doing. We would also do our micro trash cleanups inside the nest. We would also do a 60-day health check. And once again, checking the bird, checking for micro trash, just seeing how things are going. We used to do a 90-day health check. And at the 120-day health check, that's the time when we attach the wing tag to the baby. So there's little birds running around with a big old wing tag on it, but he's not flying yet. Now we only do it twice. We only do nest entries twice. We do egg viability and 120-day health check, and we attach the tag at that particular time. And talking about mountain goats and mountain climbing, these guys are beyond, you know, imagine trying to get into a nest that way. And then that I believe is Joseph Brandt, our ex-condor supervisory biologist. Here's that nest entry I was talking about earlier. You can see the guy at the top, the rope is going all the way down, and here's the nest where he's going in. This is Pole Canyon over there in the Hopper Mountain area. But it's a lot of work getting down into these nests, believe me. There's Joseph again holding a baby. We'll feed them. We used to feed them oxygen in the old days. We'd go out there with our oxygen bottles and we'd put a little oxygen in there to help them out. We put a sock over their head so that they're not so spooked. They don't react so badly. Otherwise, they'd be really afraid. You could see by that full crop that baby just got some food. There's a little bit bigger bird. I don't know, he may be a month old or something like that. He's got a sock over there over his head so he can be handled. When we get near the birds, you know, they get spooked and they fly away. This particular nest is up at what they call Orchard Draw in the Bitter Creek area. Nests and chicks. The previous picture there, that's Jeffrey. Somebody named him Jeffrey. That's him standing over his egg. They are very, very good parents, condors. Both parents will incubate the egg. They'll sit, the mate is out there, out flying around getting food, and then it'll come back and trade places with the other bird. And they're very doting parents. And that's what they look like when they just hatch. Feeding time. You know, they regurgitate their food. So when the condor has a full crop, he'll come back in there and feed the baby. So it's an interesting process. There's a little guy This was Tom's Canyon. That was the last year we had a condor came in there, was in Tom's Canyon, and that baby was just fed. And here's the final result. We have a parent up there in the corner, 289. We have the dad here, 374, and we have the baby 923. Unfortunately, today the parents are no longer with us, but the baby still is. That's just before fledging. What's on the condor menu? Well, we have cow, we have deer, and we also have some large animal. It could be a whale, it could be a sea lion, it could be. So up there in the Big Sur area, they're going to eat more sea life than the more inland birds that'll eat the deer and the cow. And this is an interesting set of pictures because a steer was just put out there, a baby was just put out there for feeding, for trapping. 13 birds in 9 minutes arrived on the scene to take care of business. And in the end, there was nothing left. And then we have the full crop. That's what they look like when they've gorged themselves on maybe 3 pounds of food. That'll probably hold them probably near a week. Unfortunately, all the birds that are listed on that page are not with us anymore. The impacts, the long-term recovery. These are the things that I in all of my studying around, these are the things that were paramount in my mind. Low reproduction rates. Once again, 1 egg every other year to raise the thing. The numbers are already working against them. So that's where the condor recovery program comes in, because if we can get them to double clutch, we can get more birds out there in the field. Nest failures. Now it could be a bad egg. It could be a predated egg. There's a couple of things that could happen there with it. Nest predation, crows and ravens getting in there when there isn't a bird around to protect it. Bears, different animals trying to get up in there. Lead toxicosis, we've already talked about that, the biggest killer of all. And not only, in California, you can't hunt with lead, but that doesn't mean that in Arizona and Utah and other places, they may still have lead in the air, and anything that eats it is subject to that. H-Pi, avian flu, killed 22 birds in the Arizona flock. So far, it has not migrated here to California. We've been lucky, but vaccines have been developed. It's a 2-part vaccine, kind of like a COVID vaccine. It's a 2-part vaccine, and all of the birds now in captivity prior to release are being vaccinated with this. So that we're trying to make sure that we don't get, and this is one of the reasons why we have these different flocks, these 4 or 5 different flocks, is because we don't want all our eggs in one basket, so to speak. If we lose some birds somewhere, we want to have a pool of birds that are going to sort of guarantee the fact that the condors are going to keep going. We need that. Biodiversity gene pool, I talked a little bit about that, because everything comes from the 22 birds that were left in the world. Gene pool is a little bit weak. We don't know fully how much that plays, but it's a factor. Fledgling mortality. When it could be a part of predation. It could be part of the fact that when the bird finally fledges, he's got to learn how to land on a branch, learn how to land on a rock. Sometimes they don't do all that well those first few flights. Sometimes they'll end up down in the bottom of the canyon and be food for something like a coyote or somewhere along that line, because once they get down, they can't flap up like other birds can do. So that can be an issue too. So there's a lot of factors that are working against the condors. I like to think that they're worth saving through the condor recovery program. program recovery costs. I would, based on some of the research I've done on this, it probably runs about $2 million a year to support this program. I think at least $50 million has already spent trying to save this bird. And it's probably the most aggressive spending program for species recovery that ever was. I know they probably spent a lot of money trying to save whooping cranes too. And they did, to a certain extent. There's probably about 800 birds in the flocks right now. And they are endangered where the condor is critically endangered. Golden eagle, bald eagles now are down in the least concern area. Spotted owls are they're above least concern. They're probably in the I don't know. They're in the vulnerable areas. And so are to a certain extent Andean condors are also in the vulnerable area, but there's about 11,000 of those. So they're not as near in trouble as the California condor is, which is probably why we used them during what we call the condor experiment, the Great Condor Experiment of 1988 to 1992. We didn't want to waste our birds trying to figure out how to release them and what to look for and stuff like that. So if you ever wonder why you get bad reception on your satellite dish, this was taken up there at our radar site. You just happen to see that. So that's one of the reasons why. So that's the end of my program. If there's any questions out there that I might be able to answer, once again, I am not an expert at this. Well, thank you very much. But I do know a little bit. Yes, ma'am.
Do they have a sense of smell? Besides
The question is, do condors have a sense of smell? Their sense of smell is very, very poor. They rely on, that's why I say there's a little bit of a symbiotic relationship with turkey vultures, because turkey vultures have a wonderful sense of smell. And they're the ones that really can spot the food by smell. Condors, not so much. And condors do not have they don't make a noise in the sense that a bird does. They don't have a squawk box, if you will. They have, probably all you're ever going to hear from a condor is grunts and hisses. But to answer your question, no, they do not have a good sense of smell at all. But they don't need it. They have a great sense. They got a great set of eyes, and they also depend on looking for other birds doing things too. Yes, ma'am.
So you mentioned the Yurok tribe reintroducing condors just recently.
Yes.
I was wondering if you could share with us what you know about that process and how long it took for them to get from, this planning phase and to reintroduction and release.
The question is, how long did it take? I'm going to paraphrase your question. How long did it take for the Yurok tribe to start the process of getting condors being condor hosts till today? And I would say that the process started in 2008. They came to Fish and Wildlife and they said, hey, we would, because the bird is a cultural, it means a lot to them culturally. They would like to be, they would like to raise them. They would like to, in fact, they focused basically their wildlife program into getting condors. So I would say it probably took them from 2008 to 2022. It took them a long time to finally get from the planning stage all the way up to the point that they had their flight pen built and they were ready to receive birds. Yes.
You said there were 22 that died from the avian bird flu. I was wondering if that was compared at all to the stud book to see if they can be tied to any genetic ties, and then if that was potentially taken out of the breeding program, they had like susceptibility to the bird flu.
The question is, as I can paraphrase it, is did the outbreak of H. pie, the avian flu, have anything to do with the genetics? Is that the question?
Yes, and furthermore, did you take any of those out of the gene pool, if you will, and found that they were highly susceptible to the bird flu?
I am not aware that that happened. I think that it probably had nothing to do with the genes. It's just that the bird flu just kind of came in there and took over. And I don't think there's any link to the genetics of the bird, whether it was a weak bird or a strong bird. It just kind of came in, kind of like the way it came in and took chickens. There's no rhyme or reason for it. It just happened. And, we were sad to know that we lost the 22 birds. I have to preface this whole presentation by saying that this is all based on the Southern California flock. I am not privy to what goes on in Central California, Arizona, Utah, down in Mexico. So all the information you heard from me today is based on the Southern California flock. Yes, sir.
So based on that, dispersing young birds, have there been any crossovers from, say, Southern California up to Pinnacles or Grand Canyon, or is there any?
The flock,
Are there any nest sites outside of the release area, say in between the Pinnacles and Southern California?
to answer that question, are the birds commingling between flocks? Is that a good way to?
That's good.
Okay,
Establishment would be awesome.
Okay, the answer to that is we've had birds interchange between Central California and Southern California. They do come down, we have not had a Romeo and Juliet kind of thing going yet. Our birds have not interlaced with their birds in terms of mating or nesting or anything like that. They've kept themselves fairly separate. I know the geography helps keep things separate. We will not, I doubt if we'll ever see a Utah, Arizona bird come into our flock. And part of that is the land that they have to cross. There's no way they could soar that far. They need the thermal. So they kind of have to follow the mountain ranges, which is why, for a bird to fly, let's say from the Santa Barbara Mountains across Fresno into the Sierras, probably won't happen. Just because there's not enough uplift to keep them going. Where if they follow the mountain range from Santa Barbara down around through the southern end of the San Joaquin Valley up to Tehachapi's, they can do that because there's plenty of vertical lift for them. So to answer your question, we have not seen yet any commingling between the Central California flock and the Southern California flock. However, visitors have gone back and forth. We do have one of the Central California birds that comes down and visits us pretty regular, number 1027. Does come down and visits, and he'll go back up, and some of our birds will go up there, come back down, but so far there hasn't been any flock commingling. Yes, ma'am.
Do you know if the Northern California birds are nesting in the wild yet, or has it not reached that stage?
I don't know. I think most of those birds up there are less than 5 years old. Just looking at, there may be one that's older, but I don't think any of those birds are mature enough to do that. They don't become sexually mature until probably their 6th or 7th year. Even though they become adults, they don't become sexually mature until maybe 6 years old, 7 on the outside. So I got a feeling that those birds are not yet mature enough to reproduce. I think right now they're kind of establishing territories. They're trying to figure out where they are. When I think about Southern California versus up there, the first thing I'm thinking about is habitat. Where, do they?
The nesting stuff.
Yeah, where's the nest? Do they have good? Yeah, they would probably nest in trees, but they would be nesting in tree hollows, maybe. They wouldn't nest because they don't make a nest in the traditional sense. They basically drop an egg in a dirt pile and that's it. That's as close to a nest. Maybe they'll move a rock around, but they won't make a nest like an eagle does or anything like that. They don't create a nest. They look for a hollow in a cliff somewhere or a tree, and they'll go in there and drop the egg, and that's where the nest is. So
A big redwood or something. Up there.
yeah, they might. We don't know that yet. And once again, I'm not there. The Yurok's are very secretive about what's going on up there. When you see pictures of they actually have some live cams on there, and they blot out areas so that people will not look. They will not be able to find their equipment and all of the things they do, because they're trying to keep the mankind imprint off the birds. So they're very, very secretive about it. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, did they?
Are there any other questions that I might be able to
One
answer?
more.
Yes, sir.
Wind farms have, any GPS locations, shown these birds deployed, these wind farms?
I believe that they have been avoided wind farms, and I think one of the last things I want to say before I sign off is that since this is, yes, I believe, but I also think that the wind farms are, in one case, they've actually done something to prevent birds from getting in there. They took one windmill and completely circled it so that the birds can't get into that. Does that help? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I just.
Yes, ma'am, in the back.
Thank you so much for talking so passionately about these birds. One of my earliest memories, going to LA Zoo camp was seeing a California condor, and my first word was bird, and so this was sort of my spark bird. Anyways, I just wanted to take an opportunity to speak to the wind farm, portion of the question before. There are geofences in place, in Tehachapi for that Mojave Wind Park. Unfortunately, that Mojave Wind Park overlaps with the range of the Southern California flock condors. But there are environmental consulting agencies that staff that area. The birds, as Lane so perfectly explained earlier, they are equipped with these cellular tags that help to send a text alert to those particular individuals when the birds come into range. And in those efforts, they're able to avoid, what could be a lethal strike.
Do they actually turn the turbines off?
Yes, they do, and very promptly. There's somebody staffed up there, 30 minutes prior to sunrise until 30 minutes after sunset, and it's a requirement. It's part of the agreement with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So there is an overlap there, and those folks that are out, in that area, do see them, but
Do you know if there's been any known mortality of a condor?
no, and not related to wind turbines, but there has been a condor that was shot on site by a hunter.
Yes, and it was down near Maricopa where that happened. And that was unfortunate.
Yeah, and there was one also up in Mojave as
Ah.
well, just over sort of by the Cowlands area over the past. But anyways, just wanted to throw that in there.
Great information.
Yeah, and if you're interested in any of that geotagging technology, the geofencing technology, there's an excellent article that Audubon Magazine put out maybe 7 years ago or so. It's still a great read, and it talks in great detail about how that's working and what that's doing to sort of pioneer the safety of future and all birds, including California condors.
Well, I'm sure that hawks and golden eagles are all impacted by that too, not only condors. Condors obviously are the birds of the greatest concern, but there's a lot of birds that can be affected by that. So yeah, that's some great information right there.
And a follow-up question would be, how can we get money to your organization to help support the amazing efforts that you're putting forth to save this?
You could write us a check for any amount that you would like and make it out to Friends of California Condors Wild and Free. You can do that. We certainly would appreciate it, because this is how we fund the things that we do for outreach and for the support that we give Fish and Wildlife. They don't want to admit it, but we are a partner to them. I mean, they come to us and they say, hey, we need a little help, and we are generous. We try to be generous. Yes.
What do you have on the table? I think that would be a good thing to
Oh,
tell everybody, so we can.
Okay.
Kind of.
On my table, I have my telemetry gear. I have 2 condor feathers. I have a primary flight feather, and I also have a secondary. I have 2 tail feathers, and the tail feather on the right is actually one that had a tail transmitter on it. So what we do is, when we do the workups and we attach transmitters, they're just little smaller than a peanut with a long wire, and we take a tail feather and we kind of trim it up a little bit, and we attach this little transmitter to the tail using dental floss, of all things. and we tie them on there, and I just happened to be up at Bitter Creek one time and I found that feather. And I looked at it and it was one that was dropped by a bird that actually had the remains of the little VHF transmitter. I also have a wing tag over there, so you can see what the wing tags look like. I also have a list of, you know, the spreadsheet that I create for our group, so that I kind of keep track of all the birds in the different flocks for our group. I also keep track of the telemetry information for them, especially VHF, so that people can take their receivers like I have here, program, and we can go out and be looking for birds all the time. And each bird has a different frequency. So I have, right now, there's, I want to say, probably about, of the 94 birds we have, probably 60 of them have transmitters on them. VHF transmitters. So I got to sit there and manually plug all of that information in, and all the people who do this telemetry information, they have to enter all of those frequencies too. So I maintain that database for them. Yes, ma'am.
When you said you got started, and there were condors coming to the radar station?
Correct,
or
yes.
the tower sites?
Yes,
In north of Los Angeles.
yes, north of the San Fernando Valley.
At that point, do you happen to remember, were they all young birds?
No.
Or were some of the originals?
I can't tell you that.
Okay.
I was not following them near as closely in the late 1990s as I.
We didn't catch, out of the original telemetry birds, we did not. I don't think we ever caught them on telemetry. Of course, we didn't have the
new gear.
electronics were nothing like what you're talking about, but we never caught them going down there.
I think,
And I think it's young birds. I mean, I
Yeah.
think it's the immatures with their natural
when I was taking,
instinct to go explore stuff.
and I agree with you, but the birds that I took pictures of during that time, some of them were adults.
Huh. Okay.
Some of them were adults, and I think that maybe historically, they may have gone as far east as San Gabriel Canyon.
Absolutely.
And, you know, they used to go that far east.
We never nest there
Yeah.
at the turn of the 20th century.
But I think that for our radar site, which was right at the north end of the San Fernando Valley, probably they didn't go much further east than that at the time that I was seeing them. And we used to see a lot of birds there. I mean, I would see 18 condors there. You know, at one time, I'd see a dozen another day. I'd see lots of them, but we had a fire called the Day Fire in 2003. And after that fire, it actually covered probably from Fillmore down through Simi Valley and the hills around there. We stopped seeing them. The numbers that we would see at the radar site were reduced down to nothing. I would say probably in 2003 was that fire, so I would say probably by 2005, we were not seeing birds anymore. I don't know why. It just was. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, one question. Who's that cutesy in that picture?
This is Dolly. Okay, Dolly is a bird that is kept at the LA Zoo, and she's the ambassador condor. She will go around to different sites. They take her around. What happened with her is she broke a wing, and they tried to put her back together, but they couldn't. She was not put together enough that she was able to fly. So she became the condor ambassador. And she now, this is an old picture of her now because she's an adult. Now she's got her white underwings, and her head now is red, orange. But this is an older picture of her. But she's our condor ambassador, and she hangs out at the LA Zoo. She's Mike Clark's pet. Michael Clark is he's the main keeper of the condors over there. He runs the condor program at the LA Zoo.
How well has she adjusted to that life?
Very well, as a matter of fact. Very well. She's hand fed I mean, how good is it? She's got no challenges in life other than transportation to and from someplace. I mean, the last time I saw Dolly, my wife and I were over at the Libby Bowl honoring Jan Hamber in 2017. We had a big deal over there in Ojai, and we honored her. Which brings me to my very last point, because this month is National Women's History Month. And so I would like to recognize a couple of ladies who have had a major positive influence on the Condor Recovery Program. And the first one is Jan Hamber. She's a member of the Santa Barbara Museum of National History. And she provided basically most of the field research, most of the modern field research. We had probably two main people that worked the Condor research over the years, Carl Colford and Jan Hamber. And all her notes, she compiled them into a database that is easily accessible to everybody. And it is basically the foundation of the Condor knowledge. She has taken all of this information, all these field notes, and combined them into an accessible reference database. So everybody has access to it. So she's one of the ladies I want to recognize. And the other lady I want to recognize is Linda Blum, because Linda, she's our current resident of the area. And I say the area because she may not be, I don't know where she's from. I don't know if she's a Meadow Valley person. So I will say Quincy area, and that's all inclusive. But she is one of the major foundations too. She's worked in the Condor Recovery Program in the 1980s. She was instrumental in the acquisition of the Hudson Ranch, which was later to become the Bitter Creek National Wildlife Refuge. And without that, the recovery program doesn't have anything. She's worked with Jan Hamber. She's helped fight against wind farms in critical areas. She also was part of locating a condor that had fallen somewhere. She was out there on the helicopter hanging down there looking for that bird. So we owe these two ladies a debt of gratitude. We, Fish and Wildlife, we, the Condor Recovery Program, we, Friends of California Condors, we owe these two ladies a lot. So in the name of Women's History Month, I want to say thank you to them. Without them, none of this would be possible. I hope some of you have learned something. For some, it was a refresher course. For one, certainly, but I don't think that I think her hands are still in it, maybe from a distance, like me, because I was a board member up there for a long time, and when I moved up here, I relinquished my board chair at Friends of California Condors, only to have them call me back and say, "Hey, you must be adding value here somewhere because we'd like to have you back." So I'm back being a board member again. So thank you all for coming, and I hope you all learned a little bit. Go over here to the table and take a look and see some of the artifacts that I brought along. Feathers, radio transmitters, wing tags,